Hello, good morning, and good evening, whatever time of day it is you're watching this. Thank you for joining us for a daily Bible readings. It is February the 10th. It is a wonderful Friday. The weekend is here, and I'm glad that you could join us today. Today we are in Acts chapter 14, where we get to see some cool things take place during this chapter of Acts. And in this chapter of Acts, it is basically the adventures of Paul and Barnabas as they go out into the world to share the gospel with all those that they encounter. And while they're in Lystra and Derbe, we see an interesting interaction take place. They come and they heal a man who was paralyzed, and the locals immediately want to attribute it to Zeus and Hermes and refer to Paul and Barnabas as such of, oh, these are the gods in human form. And they are ready and willing to just treat them as if they are gods. To which Paul and Barnabas have a great reaction and go, no, that is not who we are, and that is not what is occurring here. This man was healed through Yahweh, the God, Lord Almighty of all things and all people and of the universe. And we learn some interesting things here about people and God himself. For one, we learn about people is that we are wanting and willing to attribute most healings and most other things that occur in our life to everything but God. Because God is ultimately the greatest physician, the greatest healer, and can do all things. And what we see about God here is that he is willing and able to heal any and all people if it is within his plan and time. And it's such a cool thing to see that. And a next step you could take is next time something happens in your life, whether it be someone is healed from something that we weren't expecting or someone recovers faster than expected, don't always attribute it immediately to just good immune system or science. Give some credit to God of that he is the healer and that he was watching over our loved ones, our family members, and those in our lives. And so just give God some credit as you go about your life and some of the cool things that you see take place around you in the world. Now, if you don't have time to stick around with us today for reading the chapter, that's okay. Go off and do what you need to do. But for those of you who are able to, let's read chapter 14 together. At Iconium, Paul and Barnabas went as usual to the Jewish synagogue. They spoke so effectively that a great number of Jews and Greeks believed. But the Jews who refused to believe stirred up the other Gentiles and poisoned their minds against the brothers. So Paul and Barnabas Barnabas spent a considerable time there speaking boldly for the Lord, who confirmed the message of his grace by enabling them to perform signs and wonders. The people of the city were divided. Some sided with the Jews, the others with the apostles. There was a plot afoot amongst both Gentiles and Jews, together with their leaders, to mistreat them and stone them. But they found out about it and fled to Iconium, the cities of Lystra and Derbe, and to the surrounding country, where they continued to preach the gospel. In Lystra there sat a man who was lame. He had been that way from birth and had never walked. He listened to Paul as he was speaking. Paul looked directly at him and saw that he had faith to be healed. And he called out, "Stand up on your feet." At that, the man jumped up and began to walk. When the crowd saw Paul had done, they shouted at the Iconium, in the Iconium language, "The gods have come down to us in human form." Barnabas they called Zeus, and Paul they called Hermes, because he was the chief speaker. The priest of Zeus, whose temple was just outside the city, bought bulls and wreaths and to the city gates, because he and the crowd wanted to offer sacrifices to them. But when the apostles Barnabas and Paul heard of this, they tore their clothes and rushed out into the crowd, shouting, "Friends, why are you doing this? We too are only human, like you. We are bringing you the good news, telling you to turn from these worthless things to the living God, who made the heavens and the earth and the sea and everything in them. In the past, he let all nations go their own way, yet he has not left himself without testimony. He has shown kindness by giving you rain from heaven and crops in their seasons. He provides you with plenty of food and fills your hearts with joy." Even with these words, they had difficulty keeping the crowd from sacrificing to them. Then some Jews came from Antioch and Iconium and won the crowd over. They stoned Paul and dragged him outside the city, thinking he was dead. But after the disciples had gathered around him, he got up and went back into the city, and the next day he and Barnabas left for Derbe. They preached the gospel in that city and won a large number of disciples. Then they returned to Lystra, Iconium, and Antioch, strengthening the disciples and encouraging them to remain true to the faith. We must go through many hardships to enter the kingdom of God, they said. Paul and Barnabas appointed elders for them in each church, and with prayer and fasting committed them to the Lord, in whom they had put their trust. After going through Pisidia, they came to Phamylia, and when they had preached the word in Perga, they went down to Attila. And from Attila they sailed back to Antioch, where they had been committed to the grace of God for the work they had now completed. On arriving there, they gathered the church together and reported all that God had done through them and how he had opened the door of faith to the Gentiles. And they stayed there a long time with the disciples. Church, until next time.
You are sent.